All right, I'm just gonna go through the introduction. I know this is the first interview, so I'm just gonna go through it. All right, so it's currently 4:22 p.m. on July 23rd, 2020. The name of the person being interviewed is Andres Gill. The name of the people that are attending the interview right now are Perry Verino, Kyle DeSantis, Nikki Haywood, Lucas Bertone, Adam Payne, and obviously Mr. Gill. This is Brewster Troop 1. This is Boy Scout. And Mr. Gill, if you would like to give your war and branch of service, what your rank was, and where did you serve?
Certainly. My name's Major Andres Gill, United States Army. Still active in the United States Army Reserve. A battalion executive officer with the 411 Civil Affairs Battalion. I've served in Iraq during the global war on terrorism as a civil affairs team leader with the 414th Civil Affairs Battalion out of Detroit, Michigan, in Baghdad province from 2009 to 2010. In 2011 to 2012, I served in Paktia province as a civil affairs team leader with Charlie Company 403rd Civil Affairs Battalion. And in 2016 and 17, in continuation of support of global war on terrorism, company commander of Charlie Company 411th Civil Affairs Battalion, and was deployed to the Horn of Africa.
Okay, yeah. All right, Nikki, you can go ahead with segment 1.
All right. So, hi, Mr. Gill. It's been a while.
Nick? How you doing? What's going on?
Pretty good. So we're going to start with this. Why did you join the Army? And I'm going to obviously guess that you picked the Army over the other branches. So why did you join the Army?
Why did I join it?
What made you want to join?
What made me want to join the Army?
Yeah.
Well, so I actually have so I actually enlisted in the Army after high school before college, and I enlisted as an 11 Mike, which is a mechanized infantry soldier, and then got out, went to college, went to law school, and then after 9/11, I joined the reserves and got a commission as an officer, and I chose the Army over the other branches because I think the Army's everywhere. You know, the Army actually has more boats than the Navy does. The Army has more aircraft than the Air Force does. I like to have my boots on the ground. So like, yeah.
I understand that.
You ever hear a story of the USS Indianapolis?
I believe I have, but could you refresh?
When I was probably your age, I heard the story of the USS Indianapolis, and I swore I would never join the Navy. It's a ship during World War II that was carrying part on a top secret mission, carrying part of the now unclassified, carrying a part of the nuclear bombs that were dropped over Japan, and was traveling back after dropping its payload under secrecy, and was torpedoed, and no one knew the ship was torpedoed, and the sailors spent I think almost a week or over a week in the ocean, and the majority of the survivors were eaten by sharks. So it's no thanks to the United States Navy. I mean, thanks for your service, but it's not my thing. So
yeah. Commander told us about that in ROTC a couple times.
Okay.
So when you said 1942, I remembered it.
Yeah.
So you remember boot camp? Tell us what that was like.
Well, so I've been through 2 boot camps actually. I've been through boot camp as an enlisted guy, and I've been through officer basic. And as boot camp as an enlisted guy, I mean, 19 years old and young and crazy. It was actually an eye opener from going to from just being a kid to being an adult, or being treated like an adult, or being expected to be responsible as an adult. And so boot camp was very interesting. A lot of achievements, a lot of really identifying how far you can push yourself, not knowing what you really have inside of you, and learning what motivation is, and learning what drive is, and learning what self-sacrifice and personal courage are. It's pretty interesting how you cram. Now, looking at it from an officer standpoint, where I'm older and looking at the larger picture, you understand that it's broken down into categories, and you can kind of categorize almost anything. But thinking about, you spend a portion on developing a soldier over a period of time, and you think about how do you teach every soldier the basics of shoot, move, and communicate. So it's really, understanding how you're meeting those roadblocks. But at the time when you're young, and if you guys join the military and you're an enlisted guy just fresh out of high school going into the military, it's you might think at that time you might think, this really stinks. Am I going to make it through it? Oh my God, and there was a lot of soldiers that did not make it through it, or trainees that did not make it through it. And it was weird because it seemed like it was the tough guys who you thought were totally going to make it through it, but for some reason had a hard time with it. But then looking back, from, you're talking 9 weeks for basic, and like whatever it was for I went to what's called OSIT, one station unit training for infantry. It's basically you go from basic to AIT. It's all one block. That was like 15 weeks. But think about relatively 15 weeks compared to a 52-week deployment, so when you're overseas and you're like away from your family for a year, and you're working in a different environment under hostile threat, and then you put it in perspective, you're like, wow, that 15 weeks really doesn't seem like a long period of time. But when you're in it, it seems like a long period of time. So
hold off on that. I'll let you know exactly when.
Yeah, 15 weeks compared to multiple year deployment.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, I mean, as long as you got enough licorice or sunflower seeds or pokey bait to carry, like, you realize what's really important. So like a cup of coffee in the afternoon, I mean, it is, I don't know. It's not, it is what it is. So.
Yeah. Now, you said you've been through 2 boot camps, once as enlisted and once as an officer. Was there any sharp differences between the 2?
Well, I think the difference is that, as an officer, you're a little more grown up. So you're like, so you're, there's definitely a lot of differences. There's a lot of similarities too. The similarities are, you're still looking at that shoot, move, and communicate, but you're looking at it through a different lens. How are you leading people during shoot, move, and communicate? And how are you developing those leadership traits where, leadership traits of just basic leadership traits of, I used to have this rule, first one out of the truck and last one in the truck, so it's lead by example from the front, so if you don't know how to lock and load an M4 or clear an M4 or clear a mod deuce or 240 or whatever, or throw rounds down range, then how are you going to teach someone else to do that? If you don't know how to read a map, or if you don't know how to use a compass or GPS, how are you going to lead people? in combat? How are you going to lead people overseas? How are you going to lead people just in your daily job? If you don't know how to use a radio, if you don't know how to load a radio, or how to send a 9 line or a lace report or salt report, whatever type of report you're sending, a salute report. How are you going to lead people? People are, that's the thing. You, as an officer, you're supposed to be an expert at everything that you do. So the expectation is higher, but the threat of, what do you call it, of physical, I don't know if you want to call it punishment, corrective training through physical activities is less, because you're supposed to realize the importance of failure, and how can impact or be detrimental towards accomplishing the mission, while understanding that everyone makes mistakes. It's just how you're correcting those mistakes and moving forward. What level of how can you mitigate risk? It's like, what level of incompetence or what level of inexperience, in other words, can be accepted, but how do you learn from it?
All right, so we're gonna go on to the second section. If I can move my computer. So here we go. All right. Now, you said earlier you served in Iraq, Pakistan, and on the southern tip of Africa. If I got that correctly.
Iraq, Afghanistan,
Afghanistan. Okay.
and the Horn of Africa. It's Eastern Africa.
Okay, I got that wrong in my notes. I also did not know where the Horn of Africa was, so I just assumed it was the southern tip.
And you're a Boy Scout, right? Like, you're an Eagle Scout.
Geography is not my strong suit.
I guess not.
Okay.
It's all good.
So, all right. So, you said you served in the War on Terror and where you went.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? And you said your job assignments. So, what did you do as part of the 403 Civil Affairs 411? What did you do when you were stationed overseas?
That you can say. So what I did when I was overseas, so I'm a civil affairs officer. So what we do generally, is we provide a battle space owner, a commander, with access, information, influence within the civilian populace. We're the eyes and ears of what's going on in the civilian populace, which is over 50% of the battle space. So we in Iraq, I worked with the State Department, the state's Populous Resource Management team, and the provincial reconstruction teams to resettle, to develop a plan to resettle and reintegrate Sunnis into Shia neighborhoods and Sunnis into the actual government themselves, so they could be paid and have jobs, and really reduce what we identified as a severe driver of instability at the time. So what we do is we kind of look across the battle space, and we say, what is causing the conflict within the civilian populace? Why is the civilian populace, or a portion of civilian populace, not supporting the host nation government? Is there something that the host nation government needs to change? Is it something that's inherent within the culture? Is it something that an essential service just isn't being provided. That's a driver of instability. Think about it like this: your government has specific responsibilities, the responsibility to provide safety and security, and then those other building blocks can be built from there. But without security, you can't walk out of your home and go about business, and you can't have um, uh, you can't have predictability in the outcome of conflicts. So if you have like a contract conflict, or you have a conflict for goods and services, where do you go to address that? If there's no place to address that, then people turn to violence. They turn to whatever means that they have available. So we look at how do we identify what those drivers of instability could be. So one of them, the large portion of the one I worked on in Iraq, was working to reintegrate the Sunni and the Shia neighborhoods, and the Shia and the Sunni neighborhoods, and how do we provide for and transition the sons of Iraq from the U.S. funded program to the Iraqi funded program, ensure that they're actually getting paid for doing their job. So part of it, we would do patrols out to different checkpoints and make sure that they're getting paid, and report that up. And so with that, we identify that stuff, and then we also try to work to integrate them into the government, so they have jobs. So because if you look at the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is a huge thing that we follow, right? And so if you have food, right, but you don't, and there's available food, but there's no way for you to purchase food, what are you going to do to do it? And one of the things that the insurgents would exploit is at the time is they would exploit that fact that there's resources available for people in Iraq, but sometimes people can't afford those resources. People can't afford those simple things. So it was people would go and they would get paid $100 or something to go plant an IED, or $50 to go plant an IED. They get an extra $100 to make a video of it. But so it would put puts people in a precarious position. So that's why we look at those drivers of instability, and how we can work and use our partner nations, and use our partner resources internally within other governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, to facilitate those things, and build those programs. So that's what I did in Iraq. And in Afghanistan, I worked more. So in Afghanistan, I worked in southern Paktia province, which is, if you look on a map, it's near the border with Pakistan, and worked in an area that was 7,200 feet above sea level. So it was very interesting, and very rural. So in Iraq, where I worked in a larger city, in a more developed area, and in Afghanistan, I worked in a rural area, where there was dirt roads, and I remember seeing one paved road in Afghanistan, and that paved road was actually a road. We were rolling down this road to go check out do some civil reconnaissance in an area that we just weren't at, but we knew that a known insurgent lived in the village, right? Lived in the area, and that he was a member of the Shura of the larger community, and lo and behold, we roll up from a dirt road to all of a sudden a paved road, and Indian contractors like building a paved road through this guy's village. He's able to secure the funding to have his village road repaired, so that was That's very interesting. But so in Afghanistan, it was more of the eyes and the ears on the civilian populace, more on the ground, with the connecting the dots of the civilian populace between multiple companies' areas of operations. So as a team, I did, we're in Iraq. I did about 75 combat patrols, and in Afghanistan, I did 138 combat patrols in Afghanistan. And so we were on almost like a 4 or 5 day on cycle, and then a 1 day off, and then maybe a 2-week cycle and a day off. We live out of Afghanistan combat outposts for like 2 weeks at a time, and go to the villages in those areas and move around so we can paint a picture, build a civil common operating picture becomes later becomes actionable information to build into the military decision-making process. But it's being in the right place at the right time. So we used to do a village outreach to the school, the Johnny Kell High School, which was a known insurgent recruitment area, right, for military age males, kids much like young men, much like yourselves, in age. And we did the McGruff the Crime Dog outreach thing. So I facilitated the local Afghan National Police and the local Afghan local police, the ALP and ANP. So we would supply them with backpacks. We would get backpacks, binders, paper, things that you guys would send overseas, or things that we would obtain through NGOs, right? Or we just purchase them with food funds, right? And then we would distribute them to the high school to give us placement. So it would give us placement in the high school so that we could build relationships, so that if any bad guys did come, they would know who to call. And that was actually a really good program that we worked in a rural area. But when I say rural area, I don't mean like Putnam County rural area. I mean rural area where there is where literally we're in a combat vehicle outpost, right? So where you just take your vehicles, you make a circle out of them and point them out, and that's where you live, for a night or two or whatever, right? So and my team, we're watching on our infrared in our vehicle. We're watching a guy jump a fence from his kalat, which is his home where he lives, to his neighbor's kalat to go use the bathroom in the middle of the night. And the IR would give the heat signature, so the heat signature would come off, right? And then he would jump over the fence to go back home. And his fence is just like a mud wall. That's what his fence is, because they lived in mud built structures, pretty sophisticated mud built structures. But so yeah, but the one thing you do realize that no matter where you are, the security issue is huge. Can you imagine being in a rural area, living there, and all you're doing is just trying to farm wheat, and provide for your kids, and then somebody comes and dishonors your family, and then you travel 30 minutes over IED stricken roads to the biggest city, right? So that you can file a complaint with a judge and a prosecutor, and that because you don't have money, and the other guy does have money, because he's backed by the Taliban or other insurgency, provides that judge with money, so they prevail. So there's no justice in the system. And what do they do? How do they continue to do that? Which becomes a huge driver of instability. So we worked really hard to try and bring a local prosecutor down to that district, but every time we would bring a government official in, they would get killed. The Taliban would kill them. They would blow them up an IED. They would do a complex ambush and just destroy the car that they're driving in. And so no one wanted to come down except for the people that were down there already. and it was impossible. It was almost like an impossible mission. And by the time we left, like we were at like one of our last things we were looking for was like this huge vehicle-borne IED. I don't know if you guys know what a vehicle-borne IED is, but it's where they turn a car into basically like an explosive device where they put all kinds of explosives in there. And we were driving around looking for this Toyota. It's a white Toyota, and we could not find this white Toyota. And like 2 weeks after we left, they blew up the government district office with that freaking white Toyota. So they hid it, and they waited until we transitioned from, they found an exploitation. So like, here's the thing, it's about finding exploitation of your enemies, right? Where's your enemy weaknesses? One of our weaknesses in the global war on terrorism is that we fought 18 one-year wars. You know, actually 19 one-year wars now. 19 one-year wars, right? Rather than fighting one 19-year war. So think about it like this. Every time someone comes in, they come in, they do their job for a year, then they redeploy. We get a 2-week transition, maybe 3-week transition tops, where we do what we call left seat, right seat. So we have a continuity book. If we're good, we build a continuity book. Here's all our points of contact. Here's a continuity book. Here's what's going on in the AOR. We take them out to battle space, show them what specific people we're talking about, who our key leaders are, introduce them to our key leaders, and do that handoff. But then they run with it because they've done 6 months of planning for that mission. So they're going to come in and they're going to impact things. And it's a vulnerability that our enemies exploit, and that's a classic example of it. Is because during that right after that transition time, they blew up the entire government complex. And now, I've gone back later, I've looked at YouTube and constantly read, but that whole area is now under Taliban control. And so as a military officer, that sucks. As a military officer, as a veteran, that's it was in a lot of combat there. That sucks. It sucks really bad. Africa was actually Africa was a little strange, and I think Africa was strange because no one thinks anything's going on in Africa. But Africa is one of those places where Africa, do you guys know that the size of the continent of Africa is like 7 times the size of the continental United States? It's huge.
Yeah.
So as a commander, I had troops in 7 countries in East Africa, East and Central Africa, 7 different countries, right? So if you think about it, I had guys in a 32-man company with just soldiers, 4 to 5 man teams, spread out across the size of the continental United States. And one of the things that we really think about, getting back to that leadership and shoot, move, and communicate stuff, is we really think about planning. We really think about medevacs, right? How did something happen? You shoot, move, and communicate. Something bad's going to happen to somebody, right? Whether it's you or your enemy or somebody else, but something bad's going to happen to somebody. You're shooting at each other with guns, right? So how do you get your soldiers out of there and get them to a role 1 or role 2 or role 3 facility, whatever facility you need to get them to, and where are those on the battle space? So we look at time and distance, time and space, and time and space could be a huge enemy, and time and space is probably one of our hugest enemies in Africa, along with complacency. And I say complacency because complacency is what gets people killed. It really does. And so in Africa, it's a dynamic, sincerely dynamic operational environment where I've had soldiers in Africa in direct conflict, and then I've had soldiers in Africa who are doing specific, just direct training missions, who were in countries completely unarmed. And then I had soldiers in Africa and other countries doing anti-poaching and wildlife training, where they're working with, this is probably one of the most, our high profile unclassified mission was the anti-poaching, anti-wildlife trafficking mission, where we worked with park rangers through the embassies, because you have to understand something. When you're overseas, the Department of State is a huge asset for the United States government, and the Department of State they're the ambassadors. And in Africa, and the type of phase zero, we call it phase zero shaping operations, in that type of environment, they're in the lead. They are in the lead, and we do work under the authority of the United States Embassy. So one of the countries we're working with, Tanzania. Tanzania is beautiful. Got to go to Tanzania a couple of times. It's a beautiful country, right? But we had guys working remotely in wildlife refuge there, and if working training on patrol, training park rangers how to do and how to exploit evidence, exploit a scene, how to obtain evidence, collect evidence, work with their local prosecutors and their local police so that the poachers could be prosecuted. But our medevac plan there was literally having a C-130 fly from Djibouti, which was by the time they got ramped up because of the complacency in Djibouti, it was just insane. But then there was an NGO, non-governmental organization, who had a Cessna, who our plan was they would pick them up we'd have to get our troops to like an open field runway, not paved, just open field, where the Cessna would land, pick them up, fly them to the larger city where they could meet a C-130 to then be extradited to a Role 1 facility, or Role 2 or Role 3, depending on what the level of care required was. And so that's a lot of stress. Like you think about stress in different ways, but stress in leadership roles is different. It really is. There's different levels of stress that you can experience. Some of the other guys working in direct conflict, they had a lot better medevac plan than the guys working in that mid-level where they were still working with weapons, but the threat wasn't as high, but there was still a threat. Like I talked about complacency, like in Djibouti, we did a lot of just humanitarian outreach, a lot of humanitarian stuff. I mean, working like refugee issues from Somalia, working refugee issues from Ethiopia, from Yemen, and the issues in Yemen that overflow across the strait, and then working with NGOs on animal inoculations. Those are huge things. So now I'm an XO. Now I run a battalion, and I'm getting ready to come out of this job right now. It's my 2 years actually up this month. I'm going to hold on to it till September, and then move on. But since I've been the XO, we've deployed in 2017, I was replaced by our Bravo company. And then we still have teams in West Africa that go on a year-long deployment. And then our battalion headquarters went last year. They just came back in, I think, May. They came back from Africa, from a year-long deployment in Africa. So we did all the preparation for them, all the logistical support and everything that they need for that. And then our Alpha company is in Africa right now, getting ready to come back in October. It's constantly an ongoing mission. Because you're in the United States Army Reserve, it depends on the job that you have. And civil affairs, like 95% of us, 95% of our forces are in the reserves, because it's all about having that civilian skill set that gives you placement within the civilian populace, and able to work your work use your skill set to combat those drivers of instability. So
That seems better.
Right. So, what was the food like?
what's that?
What was the food like?
Food. Like where?
Well, when you were out and about, got back to the dining hall, I guess.
So food food I don't know, food's food, I guess. What can I tell you about food? When I was in Iraq, we used to go to in Air Force Base, Sadler Air Force Base, to try and eat food, or go to the embassy. If we're at the embassy was awesome. They had really good food in the embassy. But one of the benefits of my job is getting to eat out in society. So eat out in the culture, which is pretty good. When I was in Afghanistan, we used to go to this bazaar. So I remember we did patrols into like the it's almost like the village, like the district center, like where you'd have like the stores and stuff like that. We stopped at a kebab place and eat kebabs, or bring kebabs back to base when we like went back. That was pretty good. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, food's food.
Yeah.
Some food's good, some food's not so good.
How do people entertain themselves?
What's that?
How do people entertain themselves?
How do people entertain themselves? So I guess it depends on what you're, I don't know, it's dumb things, I guess, entertain yourself. When I was in Iraq, we actually went to there were USO shows. I got to go to a couple of USO shows. I got to see in 2009 or 10, I forgot what it was, but I got to see Zach Brown band, which was pretty cool. And in Afghanistan, I never got to go to a USO show, but we entertain ourselves in the truck, over the comm system, playing, just like talking movie lines, like Step Brothers, or was another one, Alex Trebek, the Saturday Night Live, Alex Trebek with Sean Connery. I don't know if you guys ever watched that or not. It's hilarious, and Burt Reynolds. There's one thing about food: blueberry Pop Tarts. I ate so many blueberry Pop Tarts in Afghanistan. I haven't eaten blueberry Pop Tarts since 2012. Yeah, in Africa entertainment. Oh man, what do you do for entertainment in Africa? Actually, in Africa, I just played a lot of poker with other officers. Because I actually had a lot of other, when I was where my command element was, we had a lot of other officers from different units. So that was my entertainment. Yeah.
Do you have any photographs?
Yep, got lots of photographs. I actually had to recover some. I got photographs on different computers that get them off hard drives and stuff. But yeah, I got photographs all over the place.
Did you keep a personal diary?
No, not really. I mean, our diaries are really like our green books. Like it's like a leader book where you write, all different kinds of information. I got those going back to my entire like military career, but they're not like it's not like a diary or anything like that. So
What is a green book? Is that a log of what has occurred during the day, or
yeah, it's like so it's like every time you like go to a meeting or you go to do something or something, I mean like you gotta write something down, you have a green book. We went on a duty or an obligation to write anything down,
okay?
but it's like a leader book, so it's like it's let's see if I got one right over here. I got one. No, I don't have one here, but it's just a book. Nope, I don't have one here.
All right. How did you stay in touch with your family?
What's that?
How did you stay in touch with your family?
Like telephone or Skype or writing.
Do we move on to segment 4? All right. So
Just remember, he's still in the military, so it's not kind of an over thing here. So just remember as you're asking those questions, okay?
yeah.
All right.
Did you make any close friendships on the service?
Yep.
Do you recall where you were the day your service ended?
No, not yet.
What did I just say? What did I just say?
I know,
It was only 2 minutes ago. Not even.
most of the questions pertain to like after service.
Lucas, I can tell you this. So like just getting back to like friends. So like Facebook has been awesome to like stay in touch with friends. And because friends is something that has transition from one unit to another or from one deployment to home to CONUS, CONUS being just like continental United States, or other assignments, then unless you stay in touch. I still stay in touch with friends from OBC, from basic. I stay in touch with friends from pretty much all the units I've been in. And in the fall, I went to a buddy of mine who's a Navy guy, augmented to us to my battalion in Iraq. I went to his retirement ceremony in Florida. We're still close. Buddy of mine, we went to Iraq and Afghanistan together. We deployed the 2 combat zones together, and we still stay in touch all the time and send each other cigars. Every now and then a package will show up at my house and my wife will bust on me like, "Oh, is that from your boyfriend?" Or like I'll send stuff over to him or whatever. Like I mean, it's just those little things. Mark, my buddy from Iraq, and sent, like just my buddy Jake from Afghanistan. He's a state assemblyman. We still stay in touch. I go to his campaign events, or he comes whenever he comes down in our district or something. I'll go see him. We'll grab lunch or something. A couple months before COVID, we were at the Equestrian Center with Kevin Byrne up on Star Ridge. The buddy of mine, Mike, we deployed to Afghanistan together. He was a team sergeant of my buddy Gary. And then he deployed with me to Africa as one of my guys in Africa. We still stay in close touch, and stay in touch with a lot of friends who, that from different units, and things. I mean, I think as time goes on, you know, buddies from Afghanistan will hit each other on Facebook like every now and then, or like every year at a certain time, you know, like, but yeah, I mean, like you go through these things, these events with each other, and I don't know, pick up the phone at any time and call each other, and it's it too easy, you know. So, yeah. Lifelong friends.
All right. Well, I really don't see
See you
many
later.
for the name here.
I have a question, if you don't mind, Kyle. So how do you balance your military responsibilities with work and your family life now that you're in the reserves? How do you keep that balance?
You know, Perry, that's a great question, and that is a struggle. It's constantly a struggle, and the reality is that it's tough. It is. I can't tell you how many Easters or birthdays or anniversaries, or for a while, I think I had to stretch like 4 Easters in a row where I wasn't home. And you know, like it's hard. It is, because here's the thing. On one side, you're like you're managing, like I manage a business on one side, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm involved in people's lives and making decisions and representing them at critical points in their life. But on the other side, I'm like a dad, and I'm like trying to like raise kids, and I'm trying to make up for lost time, losing 3 years, over 3 years, 3 years of deployments plus training events and things like that. That, you know, I mean, are just, you know, you're gone. You know, it's time away. And then balancing that with a military career where you're like, look, the things that we do are serious. So you're like, oh, they call it you know, it's we get paid part-time for a full-time job, is really what it is. Because yeah, you know, they say 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, whatever, but like that equates to, when you're an officer or a senior non-commissioned officer, or you're just non-commissioned officer in a leadership role, that equates to, look, tonight I'm going home to write someone's eval tonight, because I gotta get that done. I gotta get awards done. I guess I got logistics reporting to do. I get on a call twice a month for a brigade and a command, one star general briefings. So it's just difficult, because if you don't, here's the thing, like, if you don't take it seriously, and if you don't and if you don't, you know, accomplish your task or complete your tasks and do them in a you know, do them solid, you know, I mean, do them the way they're supposed to be done, and people get hurt.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. People get hurt. So it's like, you didn't deploy the unit with nods, let's say with night vision goggles, because you didn't fill out an ONS, an operational need statement, to fill a need where you don't have enough to field one for everyone, and then someone gets killed. I mean, who's that on? It's on leadership. You know, I mean, that's what it is. But it's you know, it's like and training, and so it's a tough act, and it's one that, you know what, I struggle with. I know I struggle with it, because when you come back from deployment and you're like high speed, and you're on it, because you know you got your head on a swivel, and you're walking around every day, and you know what the heck, you know what it's all about. You come back, and then complacency starts to set in and things like that, and you're like, but it's you know, it's then you feel like this obligation or this commitment to like making sure that everything's done correctly, but then you can't overcommit, because then you're civilian job's going to suffer, and then what's paying the mortgage in the reserve career? It's not the reserves that's paying the mortgage, but it's, you know, I mean, but it's but and then what about your family? Why are you doing it in the first place? So it's I don't know. It's a battle. It's always a battle. How do you balance that stuff out? And I gotta tell you, like, I mean, leadership does not. They don't look at it as a as what you call it as oh well, I, you know, I'm not getting paid right now. I'm not on duty right now, so I can't do this. That's not an excuse. So, you know, it's just not an excuse. You're a soldier 24/7, so get it done, son. And or you know, and yeah, that's about it, really. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
did I answer your question?
It did. It did. Thank you. I have one semi-related. So how do you, in the reserves, can you still advance in rank, or you need to be active to advance in rank?
No. So the way the reserves works, the reserves is actually broken down into, so the reserves is a sub command of U.S. FORSCOM, which is United States Forces Command, right? Which controls, you know, I don't know, 80% of the forces structures of the Army. The other maybe 10% are controlled by like AMED, and the other 10% are controlled by SOCOM or something, right? But the way that the reserve, so because there are actually, what you want the, so anyway, how do I kind of say this? So the reserves it's just a command. That's all it is. So there's a difference between National Guard and reserves, where National Guard is controlled by the states, by the governors, under Title 32 of the U.S. Code, and that they need an order by the president to be to be mobilized under Title 10. And so in the National Guard, their promotions are worked through a state system, and then they have to be federally recognized. So even though a person in the National Guard could, let's say, be promoted to captain from first lieutenant, the federal government still has to recognize that promotion. And if they don't, they're still only paid by the federal government on Title 10 orders as an O3, an O2 as a first lieutenant, rather than O3 as a captain. But when they're on state, then they can be paid as a captain rather than a first lieutenant. So that's a huge difference. The reserves itself, the U.S. Army Reserve or the U.S. Air Force Reserve or the U.S. Navy Reserve, they're on Title 10 automatically. Like we're not part of that National Guard structure. Okay. So the benefit of that is that when we're mobilized, we can go to anywhere in the world, and when we're on orders, we can go any state, anywhere. Go from like 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds. The promotion system is they have a reserve and an active promotion system in the Army, right? But it's a same system. It's just that your your board is different. So like where your competition, so who you're competing against. So because let's say out of a pool of, let's say there's an available slot of like 1,000, let's even say like 200 lieutenant colonels, right? Slots available in the reserve command, right? Now you're competing against 200, you're competing against, let's say 250 majors who are eligible for promotion across the United States Army Reserve, right? So you have this, and it's the same criteria as if you're an active regular RC, we call it regular component. Okay. Because we're broken down in different compositions. So you have RC, which is regular component, which is what we refer to as active duty in the broad sense. You have within the reserve component, then you have what we call AGRs, which are active guard reserves, which are, they're full full-time 365 days a year in uniform, okay? Same as the RC component. Then you have TPUs, which is what I am. I'm a TPU. It's still an active reservist. We can be, we can, whatever, we have an obligation to do 48 mutas, 20, which is like 48 days of drilling and a minimum of 2 weeks of annual training, which really winds up being about 30 days. So there are different pay rules for like housing and stuff like that. But the reality is that it's like it's still part of that system. Then we have IMAs, which are individual augmentees, they're like reserve soldiers, part-time soldiers, but what they do is they augment active duty units for like 6 months out of the year, whatever. I think it's like 4 months. You go on active duty for 4 months, and then you're home for the remaining 8 months out of the year. And then we have what's called the RR, which is the individual ready reserve. So the RR are not active reservists. Those are the ones who are just like, they have to report annually to like a muster or something like that to make sure their medicals, but they don't get paid. They get paid for that one muster, but that's all they get paid for. They don't get an ID card or anything like that. And there's no benefits associated with it. Yeah, so, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Kyle, back to you.
All right. I'm just gonna wrap up a few more questions. I know you're still having in the military with experiences and whatnot, but has your experiences influenced your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Like how my experiences influenced my thinking about the war or military in general. Okay, here's the deal. War is like it's a necessary evil, but it's not something people wish for. Right? It's a yeah, I mean that's I think that's a reality of war. I think that our country's gotten too far away from where we were in the 60s and early 70s with a draft, so we always look at second, third order effects, right? So if you look at second, third order effects of eliminating a draft, well, part of eliminating a draft is you get rid of people who don't want to be there, okay? When you get rid, and you know what, by getting rid of people that don't want to be there, you're creating a more professional force, because you're creating a force of people that want to be there, have a duty or obligation to be there, feel like they have a duty or obligation to be there. However, I think a second, third order effect of not having some type of compulsory service, whether it either be a military or a Peace Corps or some type of service that you have to provide as a young individual before you enter college to obtain citizenship. Or if you would have to have military service as a prerequisite to hold elected office, which may actually be a better argument. Maybe we wouldn't have so many wars, or maybe we wouldn't have so much division, because the reality is that our military is it's a political, it's an element that's utilized for national or advocacy of the national state, and to influence our way of life around the world. And so it's part of what we call DIME, right? Diplomacy, information, military, and economics. How do we demonstrate national power and utilize national power to advance our way of life and to help others advance their way of life, to promote the ideals of democracy and freedom? So if you look at that, that's one of four. The military is one of four projections. So I think what the military has done for me is allow me to look at to be more of a critical thinker on looking at international policy. I think also deployment experiences really kind of driven me to the understanding that, and through my jobs in the military, driven me to the understanding that we're all dads or moms or grandmothers or grandfathers or sons or daughters, and that we need to treat each other with respect and dignity throughout the world, and realize that the only difference between you and a kid trying to make his way out of Syria or Afghanistan or the West Bank or Africa or South or Central America to a better way of life is because God chose for you to be born here. That's it. So the more we recognize that the only difference between us and others is something that we don't control. It really probably makes people appreciate what they have a little more. So I think that's why I'm a proponent of of some type of service. Not the military is not for everybody. It's definitely not, and not everybody should be forced into military service. I think that would be the wrong answer, but I think everyone can be forced into some type of service because as individuals collectively we bring something to the table. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, but there's things that the world needs that I think everyone's strengths can be associated with, that would provide our young individuals with a better understanding of how their actions affect others, and provide them with a better understanding of why they should be thankful for everything that we have and how they can utilize their positions from which they sit or which they stand to help others. You know?
And again, this question kind of follows along a similar slope, but the last one was, how has your service, how has it affected your life?
How has it affected my life? Like physically? Physically, probably, I feel like a 70-year-old man trapped in a 45-year-old man's body. You can withdraw that answer though.
We'll cut that out of the recording.
Right? Yeah, cut that out of the recording. Like I think, like you can take positives or negatives out of anything. Like I think the reality is that we all make choices, and making those choices lead us in different directions, or and I think the military's been a positive direction for me and for a lot of people that I know. I think that being able to like there are definitely some negative things, but those things what you call it, when you want to help people, there's a cost, there is, and I think that the military overall has been a or is and continues to be part of my life and will be part of my life for as long as I'm alive. So.
Final question that I have is there anything else that you would like to add that you haven't already said before in this interview?
I'd like to say thanks for doing what you're doing. I think that what you're doing is really good because it's really showing that we have a lot of patriotism out there, and that there is, and it's okay to be a patriot. It's okay to recognize people for the morals and values that they hold and possess and that they believe in, and I appreciate that. And so it's really remarkable because there's not a lot of people your age that that are inquisitive or want to know what sacrifices people make to preserve our way of life. And I think it's really a testament to your courage and your values. So thanks, Kyle.
Thank you for coming on and telling us about your experiences.
No problem.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording. And